One of the spirits lunged, its shadowy form stretching toward Adama like smoke. She raised her hand instinctively, and the necklace flared to life, sending a burst of light that scattered the spirit like ash on the wind. But more emerged, their movements erratic and predatory. "Stay calm," Amadi called, fending off another spirit with a protective charm. "The more fear you show, the stronger they'll become." Silent forest. She cradled his head in her hands, her heart breaking under the weight of his sacrifice. Amadi placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice quiet but steady. "He broke free, Adama. He chose this so you could finish what he started." Adama looked at the necklace, its glow steady and warm. For the first time, it felt less like a burden and more like a responsibility, a legacy she couldn't turn away from.
Well, well. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you need to subscribe.
The village of Amakuku had seen better days. Fear hung in the air like a suffocating mist, and whispers of Adama's strange connection to the cursed necklace had turned the once friendly faces of her neighbors into suspicious glances. Adama sat by the riverbank, the cursed necklace resting cold against her chest. She clutched it tightly, hearing its whispers, louder now, urgent, almost pleading. Her dreams had become nightmares, haunted by visions of a woman surrounded by darkness. The same word echoed in her ears every night, Azinne. She didn't know why, but the name filled her with a fury that wasn't entirely her own. Amadi arrived on a bright morning, the kind that belied the tension in the village. A traveling storyteller and seeker of cursed artifacts, he had heard tales of Adama from the neighboring villages, a young woman whose life seemed marked by tragedy and mystery. Walking through the village square, he stopped by the local market, where small groups of villagers huddled, talking in hushed tones. "Tell me," Amadi said, his voice calm but commanding. "Is it true there's a girl here with a necklace that brings strange fortune and darker curses?" The villagers exchanged wary glances before one older man, his curiosity outweighing his fear, stepped forward. "You must mean Adama," he said, his voice low. "She's by the river most days. But be careful, strange things happen around her." Amadi nodded and headed toward the river, where he found Adama sitting alone, her back to him. "Is the river your refuge, or are you waiting for it to give you answers?" Amadi's voice startled Adama. She turned, her eyes narrowing at the stranger. "Who are you, and what do you want?" "My name is Amadi," he said, approaching slowly. "I travel from village to village, seeking out stories of the strange and supernatural. Your name keeps coming up. They say you have a necklace, and with it, a curse." Adama stiffened, her hand instinctively reaching for the necklace. "You don't know anything about me." "Maybe not yet," Amadi admitted, "but I want to." "What's your story, Adama?" Adama hesitated. She wanted to brush him off, but there was something about his steady gaze that made her pause. "I don't know my story," she finally admitted. "My parents are no more. I was told my mother died through mysterious circumstances. My father left me when I was a little girl and never returned. It just seemed like no one actually wanted me, and this necklace, I don't even know where it came from. It's been nothing but a burden, but I just kind of feel attached to it, you know?" Amadi frowned. "If you don't know, then why don't you find out? There must be someone in this village who knows more than you do." Adama then replied, "My story is really complicated. I wasn't originally born in this town. How I got here, I can't really remember, but one thing I know for sure is that my aunt does have a lot of secrets, and she definitely knows more than I do. But I haven't seen her in months. She sometimes did tell me, we leave some questions unanswered. Maybe my past is better left the way it is." "Are you comfortable not knowing your history?" "Well, not exactly, but of what use is history, if not only to stir up generational wounds?" Amadi signed and then replied, "I've spent years seeking the truth about cursed objects like the one you carry. That necklace, it has a history. And so do you, Adama." Adama's brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Many years ago," Amadi began, his voice steady but low, "there was a woman named Niki, much like you, who found herself bound to this very necklace. He pointed gently towards the pendant, resting against Adama's chest. It was not by choice, but by fate, and it came with a heavy cost. Amadi paused, ensuring Adama absorbed every word. Nkechi was a vibrant soul, gifted with the potential to bring prosperity to her village. Initially, the necklace seemed a blessing, enhancing her abilities, granting her insights no one else possessed. But such power, it's seductive, intoxicating. Adama shifted slightly. The necklace, you see, it harbors a spirit, an ancient entity that craves control and chaos, Amadi continued. Over time, Nkechi began to change. It was gradual, her smiles fewer, her temper shorter, and her solitude deeper. The spirits within the necklace whispered to her to feed them, which she did, pushing her to seek more power, more control. She offered sacrifices, ran from town to town once people began to suspect her. She sold bully and fish during her days, and with the power of the necklace, she was able to acquire so much wealth but with no peace. A firefly buzzed by, casting a momentary glow that flickered across Adama's worried face. "What happened to her?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Amadi sighed, the weight of the past clouding his features. She succumbed to the darkness. The more she used the necklace's power, the more it consumed her, until she was but a shadow of her former self. Her final days were marked by terror and tragedy. She vanished one night, right before my eyes, swallowed by the very shadows that had promised her greatness. Some say she was taken by the spirits that had come to claim what was theirs. The story hung between them like a dark cloud. Adama's hand instinctively went to the necklace, her touch tentative, as if she expected it to react. "This is why I sought you out," Amadi said earnestly. "Not just to find the necklace, but to prevent its history from repeating. You, Adama, have the strength Nkechi lacked. You can still resist it, maybe even break its curse. But to do this, we must first understand why the necklace chose you. It wasn't by chance, because the good in the necklace seeks those strong enough to bear its burden, to channel its power without succumbing to darkness. But first, we must know who you are, Adama. The necklace's power is tied to your past and your future. If you don't understand it, you'll never control it." Adama sat by the riverbank, her hands brushing the pendant of the necklace. She sighed deeply as Amadi's words echoed in her mind. "You're comfortable not knowing your history?" Amadi had asked her, his voice steady but probing. Her reluctance to dig into the past gnawed at her. She glanced up at him now, the weight of her indecision pressing down. "My aunt is the only one who can provide us with answers." "Where is she now?" "I don't know," Adama said softly, her gaze distant. "She disappeared months ago. She was always secretive, sometimes gone for weeks at a time, but she's the only one who might have answers." Amadi rose to his feet, offering her a hand. "Then let's find her. The answers to your pastand, this necklace depends on it." The two set off the next morning, traveling through the dusty paths that wound through the outskirts of the village. Adama led the way, her steps hesitant but resolute. "My aunt always kept to herself," Adama said as they walked. "She used to tell me that curiosity would only bring pain. She wanted me to stay quiet, to accept life as it was." Amadi glanced at her, his brow furrowed. "Do you think she was protecting you? Or hiding something?" Adama hesitated, her voice soft. "Maybe both." After hours of travel, they reached a small clearing where Adama's aunt was rumored to stay when she wasn't in the village. A modest hut stood in the middle of the clearing, its thatched roof weathered but intact. Smoke curled faintly from a small fire pit outside. "She's here," Adama whispered, her chest tightening. Adama's aunt, Auntie Ifoma, was a wiry woman with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her expression darkened the moment she saw the necklace around Adama's neck. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice cold and clipped, "and you shouldn't be wearing that thing." Adama stepped forward, anger flaring. "I don't have a choice, Auntie. It won't leave me. It keeps coming back, and I don't know why. I need to know the truth." Ifoma's eyes darted to Amadi, her suspicion clear. "And who's this?" "A friend," Amadi said simply. "We're trying to uncover the history of the necklace and Adama's past." Ifeoma's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned to Adama. Some questions are better left unanswered, child. Adama's frustration boiled over. You always say that, but I'm tired of not knowing. I'm tired of being in the dark while this thing takes over my life. Please, Auntie, if you know something, tell me. Ifeoma sighed deeply, her gaze softening. All right, come inside. Inside the hut, the air was thick with the scent of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. Ifeoma sat on a low stool, gesturing for Adama and Amadi to do the same. You were just a baby when your mother died, Ifeoma began. Her name was Nkiru. She was a healer, gifted in ways the rest of us could only dream of. The villagers loved her, but they also feared her. Adama leaned forward, her heart pounding. And my father? Ifeoma's expression darkened. Obinna was a hunter, fiercely loyal to your mother. When she died, he was consumed by grief. He left to hunt the witch who cursed her, but he never came back. Adama's breath caught in her throat. And the necklace? Why is it cursed? Ifeoma hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. The necklace wasn't always like this. It was a tool for good, a link to the spirits that helped heal and protect. But Azinne, the witch, she wanted its power for herself. She bound a dark spirit to it, twisting it into something dangerous. Your mother tried to stop her, but the spirit turned against her. Amadi spoke up, his tone careful. Why did the necklace return to Adama? Because it's tied to her blood, Ifeoma said. The necklace seeks out those who can bear its burden, those with the strength to break its curse. Your mother was strong, Adama, but she couldn't resist Azinne. It wasn't her destiny. Adama's voice wavered. So it's mine? Ifeoma nodded. Yes. But you need to understand, child, this isn't just about you. This is about generations of pain and sacrifice. The necklace has consumed many before you. If you're not careful, it will consume you too. Adama sat back, her mind racing. The weight of her mother's sacrifice, her father's disappearance, and the necklace's dark legacy pressed down on her like a storm. Outside the hut, the sky was tinged with the deep orange of the setting sun. Adama stood with Amadi, her fists clenched at her sides. She didn't tell me everything, Adama said quietly. I can feel it. There's more she's not saying. She told you enough, Amadi said gently. Enough to start understanding who you are and what you need to do. Adama turned to him, determination burning in her eyes. Then let's finish this. If I'm meant to destroy the necklace and the witch who cursed it, I'll do it. But I need your help. Amadi nodded, a faint smile on his lips. You have my help. But first, we need to prepare. The necklace's power is tied to your emotions. If you're going to face Azinne, you'll need to control it or it will control you. Adama glanced at the necklace, its faint glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Then teach me. The morning sun filtered weakly through the canopy of trees as Adama and Amadi stood in a small clearing. The air was crisp and heavy with expectation. The necklace around Adama's neck glimmered faintly, its pulse synchronized with her uneven breathing. Amadi adjusted the position of a small circle he had etched into the ground with a stick. The first thing you must understand, he said, is that the necklace responds to your emotions. It's not just a tool, it's an extension of you. If you want to control it, you have to control yourself. Adama folded her arms, her frustration already rising. Easier said than done. Amadi's eyes narrowed. Then it's time to start. Amadi placed a small clay jar in the center of the circle. I want you to focus on the necklace. Channel its energy and push it outward just enough to knock over the jar. Adama sighed, her shoulders tense. I don't even know how to start. Yes, you do, Amadi said, his tone calm but firm. Close your eyes. Focus on your breathing. Feel the necklace's presence each part of you. A sudden surge of power erupted from the necklace, sending a wave of force that shattered the jar into pieces. Adama's eyes flew open in shock. I didn't mean to. You weren't focused, Amadi interrupted. You let the energy control you instead of guiding it. Try again. Adama clenched her fists, her frustration building. It's not like you're wearing it. You don't know what it feels like. And you never will control it with that attitude, Myde shot back. The necklace feeds on your emotions. Right now, it's feeding on your anger. Calm yourself, or you'll destroy everything in your path. The following day, Myde introduced a more challenging exercise. He created small, flickering illusions of shadowy figures, using his own knowledge of rituals. The figures danced around Adama, their movements unpredictable. Defend yourself, Myde instructed, but don't let the necklace take over. Adama tensed, her eyes darting between the illusions. They moved closer, one reaching out as if to strike. Without thinking, Adama raised her hand. A burst of energy exploded from the necklace, obliterating the figure's but also knocking Myde to the ground and scorching a nearby tree. Myde groaned as he sat up, brushing dirt off his cloak. That, he said wryly, was overkill. Adama rushed to him, guilt etched on her face. I didn't mean to. I am so sorry. Are you all right? Myde waved her off, his face pale but stern. Stop apologizing, he said through gritted teeth. This is exactly why we train, to learn, to fail, and to rise again. Tears welled in Adama's eyes. I'm trying, but what if I can't do this? Myde's voice softened. You are, but you need to believe it. The necklace doesn't define you, Adama. You define it. Trust yourself and it will trust you. I'm fine, Myde replied, standing with a wince. But that's exactly what I mean. The necklace amplifies whatever you're feeling. If you panic, it will react. If you lose control, so does it. Adama's voice wavered. What if I can't control it? What if I hurt someone? You might, Myde said bluntly. That's the risk of power. But the alternative is to let it control you, and that's far worse. Let's go again. This time, she approached it with calm determination. As the projectiles flew toward her, she focused on the energy within the necklace, steadying it with her breath. One by one, the projectiles were deflected with controlled bursts of energy, their trajectory harmlessly redirected. When the test ended, Myde approached her, a rare smile on his face. You did it. Adama exhaled, a mix of relief and pride washing over her. For the first time, she felt in sync with the necklace, not as a burden, but as an ally. I think I'm ready, she said, her voice resolute. Myde nodded. Then it's time. Azinne won't wait forever. That night, as Adama rested, her dreams turned dark. The golden field from before was replaced by a desolate wasteland, the sky choked with ash. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman cloaked in black, her eyes gleaming with malice. Adama, the figure hissed, her voice like a snake's.
You carry my creation, my masterpiece.
Adama took a step back, clutching the necklace. Azinne, the witch smiled, a twisted mockery of warmth.
You've grown strong, child, but do you really think you can defeat me? Let me show you.
Azinne waved a hand, and the scene shifted. Adama saw herself standing atop a throne, the villagers kneeling before her in fear and reverence. The necklace glowed brilliantly, its energy crackling with unchecked power.
This is your future, Azinne whispered. The necklace was meant for greatness, not to be shackled by your petty morals. Accept its true power, and you will rule.
Adama's heart pounded, but she shook her head. I don't want to rule. I want to end this. Azinne's smile faded, replaced by a snarl. Then you will fall, just as your mother did. Adama jolted awake, her chest heaving. The witch's words echoed in her mind, but she pushed them aside. I'm not my mother, she thought. I will succeed where she couldn't. The forest loomed ahead, its gnarled trees clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic, like blood. Adama hesitated at the forest's edge, her pulse quickening as a cold wind whispered through the undergrowth. Myde stood beside her, his expression unreadable. Are you ready? He asked. Adama tightened her grip on the necklace, feeling its faint pulse against her skin. I don't think anyone can ever be ready for this, she said quietly. But I'll do it. Amadi nodded and stepped forward, his footsteps muffled by the mossy ground. Adama followed, her senses on high alert. The further they went, the darker the forest grew, as though the sunlight itself dared not venture too far inside. Hours passed, and the path became harder to discern. The forest seemed to twist and shift, the trees forming unnatural shapes that seemed to watch them. A mist began to rise, swirling around their ankles and creeping higher until it obscured the ground entirely. "We're not alone," Amadi said suddenly, his voice low and sharp. Adama froze, her hand instinctively going to the necklace. The mist thickened, and faint figures began to emerge from it, dark, amorphous shapes with glowing eyes that flickered like dying embers. "Spirits," Amadi murmured. "Tied to Azinne's magic, they're drawn to the necklace." One of the spirits lunged, its shadowy form stretching toward Adama like smoke. She raised her hand instinctively, and the necklace flared to life, sending a burst of light that scattered the spirit like ash on the wind. But more emerged, their movements erratic and predatory. "Stay calm," Amadi called, fending off another spirit with a protective charm. "The more fear you show, the stronger they'll become." Adama gritted her teeth, forcing herself to steady her breathing. The spirits circled her, their whispers growing louder, incomprehensible but heavy with malice. She closed her eyes, focusing on the necklace's energy. With a deep breath, she sent out a wave of light, its golden glow cutting through the mist and dispelling the spirits. The forest fell silent again, the mist retreating slightly. Amadi lowered his charm, his gaze wary. "They were testing you," he said. "Azinne's magic is everywhere here. She knows we're coming." They pressed on, the air growing colder with every step. The trees seemed to close in around them, their twisted branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sky. Adama felt the weight of the forest pressing on her chest, each breath more labored than the last. Then she heard it, a soft, familiar voice. "Adama!" She stopped abruptly, her heart pounding. The voice was faint, carried on the wind, but unmistakable. "Mother?" Amadi turned to her, his expression cautious. "Don't listen, it's a trick." But the voice grew louder, more insistent. "Adama, help me." Adama's feet moved of their own accord, carrying her toward the sound. The forest around her seemed to shift, the trees dissolving into shadows. She found herself standing in a small hut, the scent of herbs and smoke filling the air. Her mother, Nkiru, stood before her, a figure of warmth and grace, but her face was pale, her eyes filled with fear. "Adama," she said, her voice trembling, "you have to save me." Adama reached out to her, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here, Mama, I'm here." Nkiru's expression twisted, her features contorting into something monstrous. "You let me die," the figure hissed, its voice no longer her mother's. "You'll fail, just like I did." The illusion dissolved into darkness, and suddenly Adama was surrounded by figures from her past villagers who had whispered behind her back, her aunt's disapproving glare, even a younger version of herself. Alone and frightened, the whispers rose to a deafening roar, their accusations cutting into her like knives. "You're not strong enough. You'll fail them all. You're just like her." Adama fell to her knees, clutching the necklace as tears blurred her vision. The shadows pressed closer, suffocating her. "Adama!" Amadi's voice cut through the chaos, distant but grounding. "It's not real. Fight it." Adama squeezed her eyes shut, her mother's voice echoing in her mind. "Fear will strengthen the darkness, but love, compassion, and selflessness will awaken its light." She took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. The necklace pulsed against her chest, its warmth spreading through her like a lifeline. Slowly, she stood, her grip on the pendant tightening. "You're not real," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. The shadows recoiled, hissing as the necklace flared with light. One by one, They dissolved, the whispers fading into silence. When the last shadow was gone, Adama found herself back in the forest. Amadi standing a few feet away with his hand outstretched. "You did it," he said, relief flickering in his eyes. Adama nodded, wiping her face with trembling hands. "It wasn't real," she repeated, more to herself than to him. None of it was real. Amadi stepped closer, his voice gentle. "The forest feeds on fear. Azinne's magic is designed to break you, but you didn't let it." Adama looked at him, her expression resolute. "She's going to try harder next time." "Yes," Amadi agreed, "but so will you." The forbidden forest seemed to close in tighter as Adama and Amadi approached the heart of Azinne's domain. The oppressive air pressed against their lungs, and the faint cries of distant voices echoed through the trees. Adama's fingers grazed the glowing necklace, its pulse quickening with every step. Then they saw him. A figure staggered into view, his clothes tattered, his face obscured by a wild mane of unkempt hair. He clutched a spear, its shaft splintered and worn, as though he'd been gripping it for years. The man's movements were erratic, his body trembling as he stumbled toward them. Adama froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Father?" she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. The man looked up, his eyes glinting with an unnatural light. There was recognition there, but also something dark and unholy. "Adama," he rasped, his voice hoarse and broken. "You've come." Tears welled in Adama's eyes as she stepped forward. "It's you. I thought you were dead." Amadi held out an arm, stopping her. "Careful, something's wrong." Obina's body convulsed, his movements jerky and inhuman, his voice cracked, torn between desperation and malice. "You shouldn't be here. She'll take you too." Adama's heart sank as she realized the truth. "Azinne," she whispered, "she's done something to you." Obina dropped to his knees, clutching his head. She broke me," he admitted, his voice filled with anguish. "I tried to stop her. I tried to avenge your mother, but her magicit's inside me." Adama knelt before him, tears streaming down her face. "You're still here. You're still my father." He looked at her, his eyes softening for a moment. "You're so much like her. Like Nkiru. She'd be proud of you, Adama." But then his body convulsed again, and the darkness in his eyes flared. "Run!" he shouted, his voice twisted. I can't control it." Obina lunged forward, his spear aimed directly at Adama. She dodged, the glow of the necklace flaring as it shielded her. Amadi stepped in, brandishing a protective charm. But Obina's strength was unnatural, bolstered by Azinne's corruption. "Don't hurt him," Adama cried, her voice desperate. "He's still my father." "He's not in control," Amadi shouted back. "Azinne's magic has turned him into her puppet." Obina roared, his movements growing more feral. The forest seemed to respond to his rage, the trees twisting and the ground trembling. Adama's necklace pulsed wildly, resonating with the energy around her. Adama raised her hands, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Father, listen to me. You're stronger than her magic. You're stronger than this." For a moment, Obina hesitated, his body trembling as if fighting an invisible force. "Adama," he whispered, his voice almost human again. "I'm sorry." Before Adama could respond, a dark shadow materialized behind Obina, its form shifting and writhing. It was Azinne's magic, a manifestation of her control over him. The shadow surged forward, its tendrils wrapping around Obina's body, forcing him to his feet. "Adama," he shouted, his voice raw with urgency. "You have to destroy it. Destroy her. It's the only way." Adama shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't leave you like this. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Obina said firmly, his voice filled with both pain and love. "I'm already lost. But you can still win. You can end this for your mother, for me." The shadow's tendrils began to tighten, and Obinna let out a guttural cry. He turned to Amadi, his gaze fierce. "Protect her." Amadi nodded, understanding the weight of Obinna's request. "I will." With one final burst of strength, Obinna drove his splintered spear into his own chest, shattering the hold of the shadow. A wave of dark energy exploded outward, sending Adama and Amadi stumbling back. When the dust settled, Obinna lay motionless on the ground, the shadow dissipating into nothingness. Adama knelt beside her father's lifeless body, her sobs echoing through the silent forest. She cradled his head in her hands, her heart breaking under the weight of his sacrifice. Amadi placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice quiet but steady. "He broke free, Adama. He chose this so you could finish what he started." Adama looked at the necklace, its glow steady and warm. For the first time, it felt less like a burden and more like a responsibility, a legacy she couldn't turn away from. She whispered through her tears, "I'll finish this, Father. I promise." As she stood, the forest seemed to shift, the path to Azinne's lair becoming clear. The final battle awaited, but Adama's resolve had never been stronger. Her father's sacrifice had given her the strength she needed to face the witch and to win. Adama and Amadi pressed deeper into the forbidden forest, its dark canopy twisting overhead like a cage. The air felt heavier with every step, and the faint hum of the necklace grew louder, more insistent. Adama's hand brushed the glowing pendant at her chest, its warmth a small comfort against the cold tendrils of dread that crept into her mind. "You feel it too, don't you?" Amadi asked, his voice low. He scanned the forest warily, his protective charms glowing faintly against the encroaching shadows. Adama nodded. "She's here, watching us." Amadi's jaw tightened, his grip on his staff firm. "She's trying to weaken you. Stay sharp." But even as he spoke, the forest shifted. The trees seemed to move, their gnarled branches reaching for Adama like skeletal fingers. Whispers filled the air, soft at first, then louder voices that seemed to know her name, her thoughts, her fears. Adama blinked, and the forest around her melted away. She was no longer standing beside Amadi but in the heart of her village, surrounded by familiar faces. The villagers, who had always eyed her with suspicion, now knelt before her, their faces alight with awe. "You did this, Adama," a voice purred. Azinne emerged from the shadows, her form elegant yet menacing, like a serpent coiled to strike. Her dark eyes glinted with a cruel intelligence as she gestured to the crowd. "This is your future, a queen among mortals, a savior they will worship." Adama glanced down. The necklace at her chest glowed brightly, its energy crackling with power. In her hands was a scepter, its tip radiating light. She felt an intoxicating surge of strength, as though the weight of her burdens had vanished.
"They'll finally see your worth," Azinne continued, circling her like a predator. "No more whispers, no more fear, just adoration."
Adama's heart pounded, but she shook her head. "This isn't real." Azinne's smile widened, "But it could be. All you have to do is embrace the necklace. Stop resisting. Stop hiding from what you're meant to be." Adama's grip on the scepter faltered. "What am I meant to be? You mean like you?" The village dissolved, replaced by Azinne's lair, dark, suffocating and alive with shadows. Azinne's face twisted with anger. "You think you're better than me, child? You're nothing. A frightened little girl clinging to your mother's shadow." Adama clenched her fists. "I'm not like you." Azinne sneered. "We'll see." When Adama's vision cleared, she was back in the forest, but something was wrong. Amadi stood a few feet away, his face obscured by shadows. His voice was cold, unfamiliar. "You don't really think you can do this, do you?" he said, his tone laced with disdain. "You've barely mastered the necklace. You're a liability." Adama froze. "Amadi? What are you talking about?" He stepped closer, and his face came into focus, but it wasn't Amadi at all. His eyes glowed with the same malevolence as Azinne's. "You think I'm here to help you? to protect you? No, Adama. I'm here to take the necklace. That's a lie, Adama shouted, her hands trembling as the necklace flared with light. The figure laughed, its form shifting and twisting until it resembled a shadowy version of herself. You can't even trust the people who stand beside you. How will you defeat me? Adama's breath caught as the shadow lunged at her, its hands reaching for the necklace. But instead of panic, she felt a wave of clarity. She closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth of the necklace. You're not real, she whispered, her voice steady. The light from the necklace erupted in a brilliant flash, dispelling the illusion. You're stronger than she thinks, Myde said, his voice steady. Adama nodded, wiping her tears. I know. As the illusions faded, the forest grew darker. A shadow stretched before them, and Azinne emerged, her form fully visible for the first time. Her beauty was dark and terrifying, her features sharp and inhuman. Tendrils of shadow coiled around her, writhing like snakes. You've been amusing, child, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Adama stepped forward, her necklace glowing brighter than ever. You've tried to break me, but you've failed. I'm not afraid of you. Azinne's laughter was like the crack of thunder. Not afraid? We'll see how long that lasts. With a wave of her hand, the forest came alive, shadows converging into monstrous forms. Azinne's eyes burned with hatred as she pointed toward Adama.
You'll regret ever challenging me.
Adama glanced at Myde, her resolve hardening. Let's finish this. As Azinne's laughter echoed through the forest, the ground beneath Adama and Myde began to tremble. The shadows around them solidified, forming grotesque creatures with jagged limbs and glowing red eyes. The forest seemed to breathe, each pulse of Azinne's power warping the trees and twisting the terrain into a nightmarish battlefield. Myde stepped forward, gripping his staff tightly, the protective charms around his neck glowing faintly. She's drawing on the forest's magic. We'll have to disrupt her hold before she overwhelms us. Adama tightened her grip on the glowing necklace. I'll keep her focused on me. You handle the creatures. Myde glanced at her, his face set with grim determination. Be careful, Adama. She's more dangerous than you know. Adama met his gaze, her voice steady. So am I.
Azinne raised her hand, and the shadow creatures charged. Myde moved swiftly, chanting under his breath as his staff unleashed bursts of protective light, dissolving the creatures in flashes of gold. But for every shadow destroyed, two more emerged, their claws slashing through the air. Adama advanced toward Azinne, the light of her necklace growing brighter with each step. The witch watched her with a twisted smile, her tendrils of shadow curling and snapping like whips. You think you can stand against me? Azinne sneered, her voice dripping with malice. You don't even know what you're fighting. I'm fighting for my family, for everyone you've hurt, Adama replied, her voice resolute. Azinne's smile faded, replaced by a snarl. Your will end just like your mother's unwise child. With a flick of her wrist, Azinne sent a wave of shadow spiraling toward Adama. The tendrils lashed out like living blades, but Adama raised her hand, the necklace flaring with golden light. The shadows recoiled, hissing like wounded serpents. Azinne's eyes narrowed. You've learned to fight, but let's see how long you can hold out.
Azinne attacked relentlessly, hurling wave after wave of shadow magic at Adama. Each strike grew more powerful, forcing Adama to channel the necklace's energy in ways she had never attempted before. She deflected a barrage of dark tendrils, the golden light of the necklace forming a shield around her. But the strain was immense. The necklace pulsed erratically, its energy surging and faltering as if responding to Adama's fear. Her breathing grew labored, sweat dripping down her face. Adama, Myde shouted, fighting his way toward her. You have to stay calm. Focus. Azinne's laughter rang out again. Yes, Adama. Focus. Let's see how far your little light can take you. The witch raised both hands, summoning a massive wave of shadow that crashed toward Adama like a tidal wave. For a moment, Adama froze, the sheer force of the attack overwhelming her. Adama! Amadi's voice cut through the chaos, grounding her. Adama closed her eyes, her mother's words echoing in her mind. Fear will strengthen the darkness, but love, compassion, and selflessness will awaken its light. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The necklace glowed steadily, its light intensifying until it pierced through the wave of shadow, splitting it apart. Adama opened her eyes, her gaze locking with Azinne's. "You'll have to do better than that," she said, her voice unwavering. While Adama and Azinne clashed, Amadi focused on disrupting the witch's control over the forest. He planted his staff into the ground, chanting an incantation that sent ripples of light through the earth. The shadows around him began to weaken, their forms flickering and dissolving. Azinne noticed, her eyes narrowing in fury. "You meddling fool," she hissed, hurling a tendril of shadow toward Amadi. Adama intercepted the attack, a burst of light from the necklace cutting through the tendril. "You're fighting me, remember?" Azinne snarled, her form shifting into something more monstrous. Her limbs elongated, her features growing sharper and more inhuman. "You think you can protect him? You can't even protect yourself." As Azinne unleashed her full fury, Adama felt the necklace's power shift. The light grew hotter, brighter, almost blinding. She realized that the necklace was no longer just a tool, it was alive, responding to her emotions and her resolve. "Azinne!" Adama shouted, her voice ringing through the battlefield. "This ends now." Azinne roared, the shadows around her coalescing into a massive, writhing form. The ground shook as she hurled the dark mass at Adama, a final, desperate attack. But Adama stood firm, the necklace glowing brighter than ever. She reached deep within herself, drawing on the love she felt for her mother, her father, and everyone who had suffered because of Azinne. The light of the necklace surged, enveloping her in a radiant aura. With a cry of defiance, Adama thrust her hands forward, releasing a beam of golden light that collided with Azinne's attack. The force of the impact shook the forest, the light and shadow battling for dominance. Slowly, the light began to overpower the darkness. Azinne screamed, her form dissolving as the golden light consumed her. The shadows writhed and shrank, their hold on the forest breaking. As Azinne's form faded, her voice echoed one last time.
"You think you've won, child? The necklace will take everything from you, just as it took from me."
The light intensified, and with a final burst, Azinne was gone. The forest grew still, the oppressive darkness lifting. Amadi stumbled toward Adama, his face weary but relieved. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. Adama swayed, the necklace dimming as its energy settled. "It's over," she whispered, her voice heavy with exhaustion. But in her heart, she knew it wasn't truly over. The necklace, though no longer a burden, was still a powerful artifactome she would have to carry responsibly. Amadi placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you realize, Adama. Your mother would be proud." Adama nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "This is just the beginning." Now glimmered softly, its light aglow. Her mother's voice, a whisper in the breeze, carried through the rustling trees. "You've broken the cycle, my child, my grace. You've given us peace. You've found your place. Your journey begins where this battle ends. The world awaits what your light defends."